With the end of My Hero Academia and series such as JJK, Black Clover starting to approach the end, and seemingly some other shonen manga, I've started to find interest in new gen manga. My curiosity has driven me to find some new series, from one that has caused quite a stir ever since it was released, to one that is a bit less known. The first one I came across is this manga called... It's written by a guy called Nihei Sutamo, or Sutamo. I suck. I first heard of him from PewDiePie when he made a video on his favorite manga, Blame. He's a pretty famous author, I'd say. And Blame, at least from what I know, is also pretty famous because it has very few pieces of dialogue and really very little words in it.
Sometimes chapters go on with no words at all being spoken.
So now we have Tower Dungeon. It's the second work I've read from Nihei Sutamo. The genre is fantasy, which is something I've started to dread hearing. I know. Luckily, Nihei's take on this is more of a dark fantasy setting, and although it does sometimes feel like a story you may have seen a million times, it is definitely very unique. Nihei's art feels very gritty and dirty. You get to see this very expansive scenery and cool gigantic structures with every page, and it's called Tower Dungeon for a reason. Getting to see this huge tower that has some pretty complex architecture inside, it's something that I've been enjoying. That's one of the things I've heard Nihei get a lot of praise for. Being able to build his stories through art alone, it's something I've started to pick up on little by little just off the 8 chapters I read. I learned that he's very good at it. At the start, things kick off very fast for some reason. I was surprised at just how fast, actually. In the first chapter, we get the very classic trope of a princess being captured, and it becomes our main character's job to go out and save her. Our prince is this random plain old villager called Yuva. He's pretty plain. I mean, he seems alright enough. That's kind of all there is to him. He doesn't really do anything out of line, but the one thing that is special about him is that he is freakishly strong. Like, he can lift a boulder with one hand strong. But to keep on going, Yuva gets recruited to the Royal Guard Battalion. Yuva and the Royal Guard climb up 60 floors of the tower where the princess is being trapped, and Yuva defeats a giant slug monster, saving his whole battalion in the process. And he becomes the famous thrower of salt. I believe it's at the 60th floor where a dragon stops them, so they have to go back down, and the Royal Guard Battalion is forced to go home due to politics or something like that. But they decide to make a new battalion so they don't feel like they're fully abandoning their mission, and so that's also legal. And this new battalion is called the 7th Battalion. The 3 characters that are in it is this one guy called Eliko, who's an archer, Lillian, who's a mage, and our plain old villager Yuva. I already like Yuva a lot. It's a pretty simple concept. Make your way up the tower to save the princess and defeat monsters along the way. For some reason, I feel like that isn't all that Nihei has planned out for the long run, but who knows. To be honest, I wasn't feeling things all that much. I wasn't really into it at the beginning. But once we start to follow the trio, you know, just going at this tower alone, Yuva, Eliko, and Lillian, getting to see how they function as a team on their adventure, that's when I started to like it. They are all noobs, especially Yuva, but it makes it so interesting to see how these 3 slowly progress in this tower, and getting to see how Yuva utilizes his superhuman strength against the things he encounters in the dungeon is pretty cool. Not gonna lie. Yuva is one of the main reasons I like this compared to other fantasy stories. He isn't a wimp. He doesn't get a harem of girls who gather around him. He does have a pretty OP ability of being an absolute Sigma male. Like, how in the hell is he able to lift such heavy things so easily? Overall, he's just a chill dude. Very chill. I remember hearing about Tower Dungeon when the first chapter was coming out, all the way back in October 2023. For some reason, it's taken me until now to actually read it, but I'm liking it. Again, I wasn't captured by it in the beginning, but once I read like the 7th chapter, I was definitely locked in. I need more of it. It's on a monthly release schedule, so although the chapters don't come out too often, it is something to look forward to every month. I wasn't really expecting anything when I got into Tower Dungeon. I really didn't even have high expectations this. But the closest manga I would say it's similar to would be something like Dungeon Meshi. Tower Dungeon just reminds me of that for some reason, but Nihei's style is something you have to see for yourself if you have never read any of his works. Not really a better place to start reading something by him than with this new manga. He's such an interesting author. My first impression was fantasy. I'll at least check it out. Probably won't be anything too special, but it is special. These first 8 chapters have been filled with a lot of content, and I'm ready to read more. Again, with this one, well, really, especially this one, I had no expectations. But it has been so entertaining with every chapter I've read. I think there's only like 19 chapters, somewhere around there, at the time of recording this. The premise right out of the gate is already more interesting to me than Tower Dungeon. I'm sorry. Humanity is on the brink of extinction, and so 47 heroes are gathered for one last battle against demons who have been taking over the world bit by bit. Hollow is the main guy of Versus, and the first thing we see happen to all these heroes is that they get destroyed. The demons are absolute units and overpower all the heroes, and something that caught my eye is there's this sword that's given out to all the heroes from the start. It's a sword that runs off the willpower of the heroes, and it seems like it can do some pretty awesome damage, and I mean, when it runs off the willpower of the heroes, it definitely looks like it's gonna come into play later down the line. Sadly, Hollow also gets defeated, but he ends up surviving. He meets up with his older brother Zabi, who is a sorcerer, and they get swarmed by demons right away. But in a last-ditch effort, Zabi isekais people from another world to their world, so I guess a reverse isekai. This ends up saving everybody. At least for a second, because real quickly they find out that the Halo-looking people that they teleported to their world are also on the brink of extinction, thanks to AI robots taking over their world. And they were trying to open a dimensional portal to get help themselves. So things go even more downhill from there, because a demon lord shows up and the AI robots, they start to work together, kind of, to try and kill the last Halo Spartan people and the last of the heroes. So everyone gets hit by the demons and robots, but by another stroke of luck, the AI robots start to fight against the demons, and the humans use that chance to escape. It's at the end of the second chapter we find out that it wasn't just one world that was reversed isekai'd to Hollow's world, but instead there are a whole bunch of different worlds that got summoned along with the refugees. It's insane. That's probably the best word, maybe. Mr. One did not hold back at all with his ideas for this manga. I don't even think I mentioned that, actually. Yeah, the same guy who made Mob Psycho and One Punch Man is also the author of this manga, so maybe I shouldn't really be too surprised. Like I said from the start, things were already more interesting to me than, something like Tower Dungeon, but everything just went up another level with the whole isekai thing. Like, I've been thinking the whole fantasy genre in anime and manga is dead, thanks to things like I got reincarnated as a fridge or whatever, but it seems like I'm wrong. I'm very glad I'm wrong. There's so many isekai stories that I read that usually have the same old green landscape every time. They don't do anything new. Like, hello, author, dude, you can literally make it any type of world your little head can imagine. Please, have some creativity. Luckily for us, One definitely has creativity. Maybe it shouldn't be that big of a surprise. Again, because he's the author of One Punch Man and Mob Psycho. Yeah, But this just solidifies in my mind that he is one of the greatest to ever do it. You can tell just how creative he is off the first 2 chapters. I know I'm going very heavy into the spoilers, I'm sorry, but I'm going to go into some more here. So yeah, a whole bunch of different worlds get teleported into Hollow's world. Things start looking like mismatched puzzle pieces, with some parts of the original world have things leading into a giant overgrown forest. There's a city that is very rustic, abandoned, that leads into some very futuristic just really crazy stuff. and environments. You got a kaiju running around, there's giants, aliens, advanced humans. It's crazy. The people who are fighting against all these different kinds of monsters have to adapt very quickly because, again, it's a whole bunch of refugees from different worlds, and maybe an even bigger twist is that all of them are fighting extinction in one shape or another. Humans are fighting extinction. And so you get a whole lot of different variables that are just crazy, and it's very hard to come up with a plan to fight against all these different monsters and whatnot. It seems like the main way for humans to avoid extinction, though, is to make all the villains and monsters fight each other. So Alo, with the help of Zabi and some random military tactical leader guy, they decide to come up with a plan of making the different threats to humanity fight each other. Along with that, we get to see some very fun matchups between the monsters. When I started reading, I was thinking it's very straightforward with the title being verses and all, but it took a completely different direction, and I'm very excited because of that. It's just so fun to see so many different things that have been pushing humanity to extinction go against each other, as messed up as that sounds. Now Hollow, our main character, he's a very earnest guy with a great heart, just what a hero needs, I would say. But being defeated by one of the demon lords in the first chapter does not help his morale at all. Plus, he sees pretty much all his fellow heroes get defeated, and he gets an arm chopped off. Very unfortunate. But he does seem like the type of person to rise to the occasion when it really matters. The best part of the story is obviously the big fight scenes between literally anything and everything you can think of, but also seeing the humanity that gets put on display is chef's kiss. From the heroes to the random civilians, the random kids arriving on the street, the theme of hope and despair are big things in this one. Getting to see that, the whole theme of the indomitable human spirit, is one of the reasons I'm really enjoying Versus. I'm excited to see more monsters and more of what makes a hero a hero. So far, Versus has had such a strong start, but being able to carry that momentum and keep the story going is also a very hard thing to do after all the initial exposition of the story gets blasted onto you. So far though, one has definitely been keeping the momentum going. Tower Dungeon feels a bit dark and mysterious while also being mystical, but this is straight up awesome and fun. Again, very exciting. I won't be surprised if it gets an anime. I mainly cover the premise of what's going on in this one, but all the details that I left out and all the other characters I left out are definitely worth checking out for yourself. I want to spoil more Versus and talk about everything up to the 18th chapter, but maybe I'll do that another time because there is one more manga I want to go over. The last time I saw Kagurabachi, it was just starting out. It only had like 4 chapters, but now it has 44 chapters, and I've caught up to it once again. Now that I'm coming back to this manga 10 months since I last read it, it has been fun to see what has happened surrounding it, considering it started out as just one big meme. Plus, getting to see how the story has progressed after the very beginning has been the most interesting thing about Kagurabachi to me. I remember the amount of traction it got was completely insane. I've never seen a manga start off the way Kagurabachi has. There's so many people talking about it, saying it's the best manga, but dude, now it really is good. It's starting to look like a staple of the Shonen Jump magazine, which surprised me at first. I didn't think Kagurabachi was going to completely fail, but I didn't expect it to still be as popular as it is now. So why is that? For those of you who don't know the premise of Kagurabachi, there's this kid, Chihiro. He lives with his dad, Kurishige, and his dad is a very skilled blacksmith who has made 6 enchanted blades that are very powerful. In the first chapter though, Chihiro's dad gets killed by some evil sorcerers, and the enchanted blades are stolen. This lights a fire in Chihiro, and he becomes hellbent on getting revenge and getting the enchanted swords back. Within the first few chapters, I remember just thinking, wow, the fights, they're pretty sick. Again, that was 10 months ago, so there has been a lot more added on. It's really just a really cool experience, being able to look at something from the beginning and then coming back to it almost a year later and seeing how things have changed and progressed. I don't think I've ever had this kind of experience with a manga before, and I can definitely say Kagurabachi has aged very well. For one thing, the fights are still as sick and have honestly gotten better. Now, the biggest thing that has changed is what's been happening in Kagurabachi. Chihiro has fought this villain guy named Sojo who had an enchanted blade, and it's in this fight that we get to see Chihiro's thoughts and ideals about these swords and, you know, just where his mind is all laid out for us, because when we first get introduced to him, he's all about revenge. I mean, very understandable, but we get to see more to that. There's a heavy theme of accountability that Chihiro keeps being faced with when it comes to the katanas, because he doesn't want his father's swords to be used to take innocent lives. Now, the first major villain, Sojo, he thinks the purpose of the katanas is to massacre everything. So we get to see a clash of these ideals, and just like that, I was able to see that Kagurabachi is able to craft not only these cool fights, but more importantly, substantial fights. Chihiro so far has been the most interesting to see out of these three main characters. Like, the guy has a line in the story talking about why he never wants to get his scar removed. It's to make sure I start the day with fresh hatred, or something like that. He gives off some very heavy Sasuke vibes. My first impression was, yeah, he's very edgy, which, I mean, he is. Like, how are you going to say something like that in the first chapter and be anything different? But still, the author has done a great job of giving some depth to Chihiro. For the most part, he's very calm and collected, very logical, but he has to battle with also getting very hot-blooded whenever it comes to his hatred of his father's killers and his thirst for revenge. There are times in Kagurabachi when Chihiro has to make choices that aren't directly conflicting with the main goal of trying to get all of his father's swords back, but there are still choices that make him have to ask himself about what's truly important. One example is the girl he saves near the start, Char. Choosing to protect her over finding a surefire way to defeat the exploding Daruma villain makes him have to shift his priorities and decide how far he is willing to go to get the swords back. I'm not sure how the author has been able to handle everything this manga has gone through, because even before the manga came out, things were already super chaotic surrounding it. Takeru Hokuzono, I'm really bad at names. It's the author's name. I just looked him up on Twitter, which is definitely the most trusted source, and so far he's been handling things like a pro, because I was really thinking the whole Kagurabachi meme story, it was going to be very up and then very, very down, but the things I have read, the things I have seen in the community surrounding it, it's pretty much only been up. Another thing is that I have been seeing some very similar things in Kagurabachi that, you know, when you compare it to shonen manga, it seems pretty similar to other shonen manga. The power system, people use spirit energy from within themselves to use sorcery. Bleach seems like it could have influenced the author pretty heavily, at least when it comes to the art. I'm not really too sure on that, but I mean, whatever the case, there are some things that Kagurabachi follows when it comes to shonen tropes, and some things it takes, or at least to me, it seems to take from other mangas. The main reason I'm pointing this out is because a lot of manga do this, but newer manga in particular, they get compared to older ones a lot more. Because when something's new, you can't help but compare it to the older, more elderly mangas, or, you know, just more elderly things. What's most important though when it comes to this type of thing is that Kagurabachi is able to tell its own story. It has its own style, and it's a very awesome one at that. After not looking into anything to do with Kagurabachi for a while, what caught my attention is that there's been a bit of a buzz on Twitter absolutely glazing Kagurabachi, and after hopping on YouTube, I see that Sufferance has also been talking about Kagurabachi, so I'm like, let's look into it finally. Let's see what I've been missing. All I gotta say now is that, man, the most recent arc has been the best one so far. We get to see this broken family called the I'm gonna go jump off it. Sazanami family. Sazanami family. There's this kid named Hakuri who is also part of this family, or at least he was, but I'm going to stop there and stop blatantly spoiling everything. I will say though, it's been enjoyable to see Hakuri find his footing and overcome some of the things that has been holding him back. The whole auction arc has been very enjoyable to read, and I'm glad that Kagurabachi has been able to surf off and ride the momentum it was randomly given last year. But going back to the question I asked about Kagurabachi, why it's still popular, I can say it's because the author has been able to tell a very well put together story. The whole auction arc, at least to me, has elevated Kagurabachi to another level, and I can say the meme is over. Kagurabachi, it's really good. From the side characters to the villains to Chihiro, I'm liking it. In conclusion, I am very broke and hungry, but these mangas, they take my mind off of that, so yeah, no, they are really quite something, actually. I already have another video planned out. I haven't even started working on it yet, but it has something to do with some devils, or something, so see you then. It will probably take me 4 years to make my next video because I have been moving at a snail's pace for the last like 2 years. Anyways, I'll definitely have my next video out sooner than 4 years, but have a good day or night and peace.